The lone biker woke up to find the police chief's daughter wearing his cut. What she said froze him cold. The morning light cut through the motel blinds like a blade, and Dalton's first conscious thought was that something was wrong. The weight on his chest wasn't his leather cut, and the scent of vanilla and gunpowder didn't belong in a room where he'd passed out alone. He opened his eyes to find her sitting cross-legged at the foot of the bed, wearing nothing but his club vest with its nomad rocker and lone wolf patch, her dark hair falling across the Iron Serpent's insignia like she'd been born to wear it. She was maybe 22, with her father's steel-gray eyes and a bullet-hole scar on her shoulder that looked 6 months old. And when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of calm that only came from having already made peace with dying. "My father's coming for you in 30 minutes, and when he gets here, he's going to kill you for something you didn't do. So I need you to listen very carefully, because I'm about to tell you why I'm the one who murdered his lieutenant last night, and why you're going to help me finish what I started. Wait before the next ride begins. If this story already hit you right in the chest, tell us where you're watching from. To ride with the Brotherhood through the next promise, loss, or redemption, subscribe and join the club. Engines up, back to the road." Dalton's hand moved to where his .45 should have been on the nightstand, but found only empty wood. The woman, he corrected himself, seeing the old violence in those young eyes, held up the pistol with 2 fingers, casual as passing salt. Looking for this? She set it down on the bed between them, still aimed at neither of them, just present. "I'm not here to hurt you, Mr. Cross. I'm here to save both our lives." "The police chief's daughter," Dalton said. His head pounded, memories of last night fractured like glass. He'd been riding through, just passing through like he always did, when he'd stopped at Murphy's bar for a drink and a bed. Everything after the 3rd bourbon was fog. Sophia Garrett. "So, you know who I am." She shifted slightly, and the cut moved with her, the leather worn soft from his years on the road. Seeing someone else wear it felt like watching a stranger rifle through his bones. That makes this easier. Or harder. I'm not sure which yet. Dalton sat up slowly, taking inventory. His jeans still on, boots by the door, keys on the dresser. No signs of struggle, no blood, no indication that anything had happened, except a woman breaking into his room and stealing his identity. "How did you get in here?" "Same way I got out of my father's house at 16, through a window and with determination." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're a heavy sleeper, or maybe I'm just that good. My father taught me to move quiet before he taught me to shoot straight." "Your father?" Dalton rubbed his face, trying to clear the fog. "Chief Thomas Garrett, the man who's been trying to run Iron Serpents out of this county for the last 5 years. The man who put 3 of my brothers in the hospital last spring for resisting arrest." 4, she corrected. 4 brothers. But the 4th one didn't make it to the hospital. Bobby Chen, 23 years old, died of a heart attack in the back of the cruiser. Except he didn't have a heart condition, and the autopsy my father buried showed bruised ribs, internal bleeding, and enough ketamine in his system to drop a horse. Dalton went very still. Bobby Chen. He'd heard about that death, heard the whispers that it wasn't clean, that the cops had gone too far. But he was nomad, no chapter, no club ties, just the patch and the road. Other people's wars weren't his to fight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because last night I shot Lieutenant Marcus Reed in the back of the head while he was counting money in my father's basement." $300,000 in cash, drug money from the pipeline they've been running through this county using police cruisers and seized assets. And I left your wallet next to his body with your fingerprints on the gun and enough evidence to make you the perfect suspect when my father finds the body in... She checked a phone that wasn't hers. 27 minutes. The words hit like a truck. Dalton was on his feet before he realized he'd moved, crossing the distance between them. But Sophia didn't flinch, didn't reach for the gun, just looked up at him with those gray eyes that had seen too much too young. "You framed me." His voice was low, dangerous. "Set me up for a cop killing." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed someone my father would believe capable of it. Someone with no ties to this town, no alibi that matters, no one who'd question why a nomad biker would execute a corrupt cop during a robbery gone wrong." She stood up, smaller than him by 6 inches, but somehow taking up more space. "And because you're the only person in this God-forsaken county who might actually listen to what I'm about to tell you before deciding whether to kill me or help me." Dalton stared at her, trying to read the angles, the con, the trap. But all he saw was exhaustion and resolve, the combination that turned people into ghosts or legends. "You have 26 minutes, she said. "I suggest you use them listening." He stepped back, giving her space, giving himself room to think. "Talk." Sophia moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the parking lot below. Dawn was breaking, painting everything gold and shadow. "My father came back from the war different. Afghanistan, 2 tours, came home decorated and broken. My mother tried to help him, tried to reach whatever was left of the man she'd married, but by the time I was 10, he'd buried that man so deep, even he couldn't find him anymore." She turned back to face Dalton. "He became police chief when I was 14. Reformed the department, hired new officers, cleaned up the streets. Everyone loved him. The town's savior, the hero come home to protect and serve. And for a while, I believed it too. Thought maybe he'd found purpose, found a way to be good again. But he didn't. No, he just found a better way to hide the rot." She crossed her arms, the cut pulling tight across her shoulders. "It started small. Evidence that disappeared, arrests that didn't stick, dealers who'd walk free after talking to my father privately. I thought it was incompetence, or maybe just the system failing like it always does. But then Bobby Chen died, and I started paying attention." Dalton listened, his mind racing through implications and escape routes. The smart move was to run, grab his keys, his bike, and be 3 counties over before the body was found. But something in Sophie's voice, in the way she wore grief like armor, made him stay. "I started following my father," she continued, "documenting his movements, tracking the patterns. I found the drug pipeline, the way they'd seize shipments and only report half of what they took, then sell the rest back to the same dealers they'd arrested. I found the protection rackets, the way businesses paid security fees to avoid harassment and false citations. And I found the basement, where my father and Marcus Reed and 2 other officers would count money every Wednesday night, dividing profits from a criminal empire built on the foundation of badges and legal immunity. Why not go to the feds, internal affairs, take the evidence and burn your father legally?" Sophie's laugh was bitter. "I tried. 6 months ago, I compiled everything I'd found and sent it to the FBI field office in Raleigh. Know what happened? One of the agents called my father personally, told him his daughter was making wild accusations, offered to help get her the treatment she clearly needed." She pulled up her shirt slightly, showing the bullet scar on her shoulder. "This is from my father's gun, fired the night the FBI told him about my report. He said it was an accident, that he'd been cleaning his weapon and I'd walked in at the wrong time. The hospital ruled it accidental discharge, and I spent 3 days in the psych ward being evaluated for delusional thinking and paranoid ideation." Dalton felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd seen corruption before, seen the way power protected itself. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, the kind of evil that wore a father's face. "You could have run." "I tried that too. Got as far as the state line before two of my father's officers picked me up on a wellness check, brought me home for my own safety. He made it clear if I tried to leave again, if I tried to talk to anyone outside the county, he'd have me committed long-term. Paranoid schizophrenia, danger to myself and others. And who would question it? The war hero police chief trying to help his troubled daughter, the girl who'd already shot herself accidentally once. 23 minutes. So you decided to kill his lieutenant instead? Marcus Reed was the worst of them. He's the one who killed Bobby Chen, who made it look like a heart attack, who laughed about it afterward. I heard him, through the basement door, joking about how easy it was to make someone stop breathing when you knew the right pressure points. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled. So yes, I killed him. Put a bullet in his head while my father was at the station. Used my key to get into the house, wore gloves, left no trace except the evidence pointing to you. And what's to stop me from going to the police myself, telling them you're the real killer, showing them the gun you're holding, proving my innocence? Sophia smiled sadly. Nothing, except that no one will believe you. I'm the police chief's traumatized daughter, the victim of mental illness, the girl who needs protection from herself. You're a nomad biker with a record, no ties to the community, and a history of violence according to the files my father keeps on every iron serpent who's ever rolled through this county. Your word against mine? Against his? You'd be dead or in prison before the truth had a chance to matter. She was right. Dalton knew it with the certainty that came from years on the wrong side of the law, watching how justice bent toward power, how truth was negotiable when money and badges did the negotiating. What do you want from me? Help me finish this. Sophia moved closer, urgent now. Help me expose my father, destroy the pipeline, free this town from the corruption that's been bleeding it dry. I have evidence hidden, documentation of everything, accounts, names, dates, recordings. But I can't access it alone, and I can't survive long enough to see it used. My father will kill me the moment he realizes I'm the one who shot Reed. He'll make it look like suicide, tragic outcome of untreated mental illness. Everyone will believe him because they always do. You need a witness, someone outside the system who can verify your story. I need a partner, someone willing to ride into hell with me and fight the devil wearing my father's face. She held out her hand. I need someone who understands that sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to make sure their killers don't outlive them. Dalton looked at her hand, at the cut she still wore, at the desperate hope in eyes that had forgotten how to hope safely. Every instinct he'd honed over 15 years of riding solo told him to walk away, to let this town's problems stay this town's problems, to be gone before the blood dried and the questions started. But he thought about Bobby Chen, 23 years old, dying in the back of a cruiser while cops laughed about pressure points. He thought about Sophia at 16, climbing out windows to escape a father who'd traded protecting the innocent for profiting from their suffering. He thought about all the times he'd ridden past suffering because it wasn't his fight, wasn't his burden, wasn't his responsibility. And he thought about the cut she was wearing, the lone wolf patch that represented a man who'd chosen to ride without brothers, without backup, without anyone to depend on except himself. Maybe that had been cowardice all along, dressed up as independence. Maybe true strength was accepting that some fights couldn't be won alone. He took her hand. 22 minutes. Tell me about the evidence. Relief flooded her face, so profound it made her look young again. There's a storage unit on Highway 47, Unit 214. Inside is a laptop with encrypted files, USB drives with audio recordings, and paper copies of financial documents I photographed from my father's safe. Everything needed to prove the corruption, the deaths, the conspiracy. Why not go there now? Because my father has it under surveillance. Not officially. He doesn't know I rented the unit, but he knows I'm planning something. He's had his officers watching every storage facility in the county for the last month, waiting for me to make a move. If I go there alone, they'll stop me before I can retrieve anything. But if we go together during the chaos of a murder investigation? Exactly. While my father's focused on hunting the nomad biker who killed his lieutenant, we slip in, grab the evidence, and get it to someone who can actually use it. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I have a contact, a journalist from the Charlotte Observer, who's been investigating police corruption across North Carolina. She's been waiting for proof concrete enough to run with. This will give her everything she needs. Dalton moved to the window, scanning the parking lot. Empty still, but not for long. Your father will know it was you eventually. Even if we successfully frame this as my crime, he'll figure out you helped me escape. I know. Her voice was quiet. That's why, after we deliver the evidence, I'm disappearing. New name, new life, somewhere hell never find me. I've been preparing for this for 6 months, saving money, making connections with people who specialize in making people vanish. And you'll leave him alive? The man who tried to kill you, who murders people for profit, who'll keep destroying lives until someone stops him? Sophia's jaw tightened. The evidence will stop him. Once it's public, once the federal investigation starts, he'll be arrested, tried, imprisoned. Justice through the system, even if that system failed me before. You really believe that? I have to believe it. Because if I don't, if I accept that the only way to stop him is to kill him, then I become exactly what he is. A murderer who justifies violence as necessary, as justified, as the only option. And I refuse to let him turn me into his reflection. Dalton respected that, even as he doubted it. Men like Thomas Garrett didn't stop because of evidence and trials. They stopped when they were put down like rabid dogs, permanently and without mercy. But that was Sophia's choice to make. Her soul to keep clean or dirty as she saw fit. 18 minutes, he said. We need to move. They gathered quickly, Dalton pulling on his shirt and boots, Sophia shrugging out of his and handing it back with reluctance. He put it on, feeling the weight settle across his shoulders like responsibility, like purpose, like the burden he'd been avoiding for years finally catching up to him. One question, he said as they moved toward the door. Why did you really choose me? There are other bikers, other outlaws who'd have been easier to frame, closer to your father's orbit. Why a nomad passing through? Sophia paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Because 2 years ago, you were riding through Asheville when you saw 3 men beating a homeless veteran behind a gas station. You stopped, put 2 of them in the hospital, stayed with the veteran until the ambulance arrived, then disappeared before the police could question you. No witnesses except the victim, no glory, no recognition. Just a man doing what was right because it was right. Dalton remembered. Vietnam vet, maybe 70, being kicked by college kids who thought it was funny. He'd acted on instinct, on rage, on the fundamental understanding that some things couldn't be ignored no matter how much you wanted to stay invisible. How do you know about that? The veteran was my grandfather, my mother's father. He told me the story before he died last year, described the biker with the lone wolf patch who'd saved his life. I've been looking for you ever since, hoping you'd ride through, hoping I'd have the courage to ask for help when you did. She opened the door. You're the kind of man who stops when he should keep riding. That makes you either stupid or decent. I'm betting on decent. They stepped out into the dawn, into air that tasted of gasoline and possibility and the approaching sirens that would change everything. Dalton's bike sat where he'd left it, a '96 Softail that had carried him across 47 states and through countless bad decisions. He threw his leg over, felt the familiar weight, the promise of escape. Sophia climbed on behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist like she'd done this before, like she understood that trust on a motorcycle meant holding tight and letting go simultaneously. "Where to first?" she asked. "Your father's house. If we're going to sell this frame, I need to be seen near the crime scene. Give the story weight, make it believable." "That's insane." "That's the play. We ride past, visible but not stopping, just close enough for any surveillance cameras to catch us. Then we disappear before anyone can respond, head to the storage unit while the chaos builds. And if we run into my father, then we run faster." Dalton started the engine, the rumble cutting through the morning silence like a declaration of war. "Hold on." They rode through empty streets as the sun climbed higher, painting the small town in shades of gold and shadow. Dalton knew these streets from a dozen other towns, the same layout repeated across America. Main Street with its dying storefronts, residential areas spreading like capillaries from the center, and on the edges, the houses where power lived, where chiefs and mayors and people who mattered kept their secrets behind manicured lawns and security systems. Thomas Garrett's house sat on a hill overlooking the town, a statement of authority wrapped in white columns and morning glory vines. A police cruiser sat in the driveway, but the house itself looked quiet, undisturbed, waiting for the storm that would hit when the body was found. Dalton slowed as they passed, not stopping, but letting the bike's distinctive exhaust note announce their presence. He saw the camera mounted above the garage, saw the curtain twitch in an upstairs window, saw the moment their passage was noted and filed away for later examination. Then they were past, accelerating down the hill, leaving the house and its secrets behind as they headed for Highway 47 and the storage facility where truth waited in a rented unit, encrypted and patient. The sirens started as they hit the highway, distant at first, then multiplying, a chorus of response that meant the body had been found, the investigation begun, the hunt initiated. Dalton opened the throttle, and the Softail surged forward, eating miles, putting distance between them and the chaos they'd left behind. "They found Reed," Sophia said into his ear, her voice carried by wind and velocity. "Good. Let them chase the ghost while we grab the truth." The storage facility appeared after 15 miles of highway, a sprawling complex of orange doors and numbered units surrounded by chain-link fence. Dalton slowed, scanning for surveillance, for the officers Sophia had warned about. He saw one cruiser parked across the street, 2 cops inside drinking coffee and staring at their phones, bored with the tedious work of waiting for something that might never come. "They're here," Sophia confirmed. "3rd day in a row. Different officers each shift, but always at least one car watching. How do we get past them?" "We don't. We go around." She pointed to the back of the facility, where the fence met a drainage ditch and a line of trees. "There's a gap in the fence behind Unit 220. I found it when I rented the unit, kept it open in case I needed an alternate exit." Dalton circled the block, approaching from the opposite direction. He parked the bike in the trees, hidden from the road, and they made their way on foot to the fence line. The gap was there, just wide enough to squeeze through, opening onto a narrow space between units. They moved quickly, quietly, Sophia leading with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path in her mind 100 times. Unit 214 sat in the middle row, anonymous and beige, secured with a padlock that Sophia opened with a key from her pocket. Inside, the unit was sparse. A laptop on a folding table, 2 USB drives, a manila envelope thick with documents. But that sparseness held weight, held lives, held the evidence of evil masquerading as law and order. Sophia grabbed the laptop and drives, while Dalton rifled through the documents. Names he didn't recognize, dates going back 3 years, photographs of transactions and meetings and money changing hands in parking lots and offices. It was thorough, comprehensive, damning. "This is everything?" he asked. "Everything I could gather without being caught." She tucked the laptop into a backpack she'd hidden in the corner. "It's enough, more than enough to start an investigation that'll tear the department apart." They were turning to leave when Dalton heard it. The crunch of gravel, the subtle shift of weight outside the unit. He held up his hand, signaling silence, and moved to the crack in the door. Two officers stood outside, not the ones from the cruiser, but different. Younger, harder, with the look of men who'd been told to shoot first and file reports later. One spoke into his radio. "We've got movement at 214. Repeat, movement at 214, requesting backup." Sophia's face went pale. They found us. The cameras. They must have spotted us coming in. Dalton scanned the unit, looking for options. No windows, one door, walls too thick to break through. They were boxed in, trapped, with minutes before the facility swarmed with cops looking for any excuse to end this cleanly. "There's a ventilation shaft," Sophia said, pointing to a grate near the ceiling. "It connects to the unit next door. If we can get through. That shaft is 2 feet wide. We'll never fit." "You won't, but I will." She was already moving, dragging the table under the grate, climbing up. "I'll take the evidence, get out through 215, and make my way to the tree line. You stay here, buy me time, then surrender when I'm clear." "They'll kill me." "Maybe, but they'll definitely kill us both if we're trapped here together." She had the grate open now, was pulling herself up into the narrow space. "My contact's name is Jennifer Moss, Charlotte Observer. Her number's in the laptop. Get the evidence to her, and this all means something. Let them catch you here, and it's all for nothing." Dalton grabbed her ankle before she could disappear. "This is suicide, for me. This is the only play we've got." She looked down at him, and in her eyes he saw gratitude and sorrow, and the steel of someone who'd already made peace with the cost. "You stopped for my grandfather when you should have kept riding. You stopped for me when you should have run. I'm asking you to stop one more time, for just long enough to let truth escape." He released her ankle. Because she was right, and because he'd spent 15 years running from moments exactly like this, from the choice between safety and responsibility, between survival and sacrifice. Maybe this was why he'd become nomad in the first place. Not to escape brotherhood, but to find the one fight that mattered enough to stop running for. "Go," he said, "fast as you can." She disappeared into the shaft, the backpack scraping against metal, her breathing loud in the enclosed space. Dalton pulled the table away, pushed it to the side, and stood in the center of the unit as the footsteps outside grew louder, more numerous, accompanied by the metallic clicks of weapons being readied. "You in there!" a voice shouted. "Come out with your hands up! You're surrounded!" Dalton looked at the documents still scattered on the table, grabbed one photograph at random. Thomas Garrett counting money in a basement. Marcus Reed standing beside him, both men smiling like wolves after a kill. He tucked it into his cut, against his chest, one piece of insurance in case everything else went wrong. "Coming out!" he called. "Don't shoot!" He opened the door slowly, hands raised, and stepped out into sunlight that felt like a spotlight. 6 officers surrounded him, weapons drawn, faces taut with adrenaline and instructions. Behind them, pulling up in a black SUV that cost more than most cops made in a year, was Thomas Garrett himself. The police chief stepped out of the vehicle with the measured calm of a man who'd seen his plan come together. He was maybe 55, gray-haired and square-jawed, with the bearing of a soldier and the eyes of something colder. He looked at Dalton the way an exterminator looked at rats. Necessary removal, nothing personal. "Dalton Cross," Garrett said, his voice carrying authority that made officers straighten unconsciously. "Nomad biker, wanted for questioning in the murder of Lieutenant Marcus Reed."
Funny finding you here at a storage unit on the edge of town, so far from where the murder took place. "Funny how fast you found me," Dalton countered, almost like you knew exactly where to look. Garrett's smile was thin. "My daughter's been renting this unit. Imagine my concern when I discovered a murder suspect visiting the same facility where my mentally ill child stores her delusions. Makes a man wonder about coincidences. Where is she? Safe, being evaluated by professionals who can help her. You, on the other hand, Garrett gestured, and 2 officers moved forward with handcuffs. You're going to answer a lot of questions about last night. About how you ended up in my basement, shooting my lieutenant, stealing from an active crime scene. I was never in your basement. We have evidence that says otherwise. Your wallet, your fingerprints, your motive. I've been making life difficult for bikers in my county. Reed was just doing his job when you decided to make an example of him. Garrett moved closer, lowering his voice so only Dalton could hear. You're going to confess. Going to tell everyone how you broke in looking for money, how Reed surprised you, how you panicked and shot him. And then you're going to die, resisting arrest. Tragic, but necessary, another violent criminal taken off the streets. And if I don't, then my daughter dies. Not here, not now, but eventually. An accident, an overdose, a suicide that everyone will believe because she's been so troubled, so unstable. I've been building that narrative for years. One word from me, and it becomes reality. His eyes held no warmth, no recognition that he was talking about his own child. So you'll confess, you'll die, and Sophia will live long enough to be properly institutionalized where she can't cause any more problems. That's the deal. Take it or everyone loses. Dalton looked past Garrett, past the officers, toward the facility's back fence where Sophia should be running now, carrying evidence that could burn this whole operation down. He thought about Bobby Chen dying in a cruiser, about a homeless vet being kicked by kids who thought cruelty was entertainment, about all the times he'd ridden past suffering because it wasn't his burden to carry. No deal, he said. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect for stupidity. Then you've killed her. I hope you understand that. I understand that you're the one who'd kill his own daughter to protect himself. That makes you a coward, not a father. The punch came fast, Garrett's fist catching Dalton in the stomach hard enough to fold him over. Officers grabbed him, drove him to his knees, cuffed his hands behind his back with enough force to grind bones together. Search the unit, Garrett ordered. Find whatever evidence my daughter stashed here and bring it to me. Then torch the place. Make it look like our suspect tried to destroy evidence. 2 officers entered 214, while Garrett stood over Dalton, radiating satisfaction. You could have made this easy. Could have played the role I wrote for you. Died quick. Been forgotten. Now it's going to hurt, and it's going to be slow, and when we're done, you'll beg to confess just to make it stop. Chief, one of the officers emerged from the unit, looking confused. There's nothing here. Just an empty table and some trash. No laptop, no documents, nothing. Garrett's calm cracked. What? The unit's empty, sir. Whatever was here is gone. The police chief spun, scanning the facility, the fence line, the surrounding area. She was here. My daughter was here. I know she was. Find her. Check every unit, every vehicle. Search the entire... A motorcycle engine roared to life in the distance, the sound echoing off storage units and carrying through morning air like a war cry.
Garrett's face went rigid as he recognized what it meant. Sophia was gone, the evidence was gone, and his perfect frame was falling apart in real time. "Stop her!" he screamed. "All units, pursuit authorized. Suspect is on a motorcycle heading east on Highway 47. Use any force necessary." Officers scattered, running for their vehicles, sirens spinning up as the hunt shifted from Dalton to the one target that actually mattered. Garrett stood frozen for a moment, caught between staying to handle Dalton and chasing his daughter before she could complete whatever endgame she'd set in motion. Ambition won over caution. "Put him in holding," Garrett snapped at the 2 officers remaining. "Maximum security, no visitors, no calls. If he tries to escape, shoot him." Then the chief was running for his SUV, engine roaring as he tore out of the parking lot, leaving Dalton kneeling in gravel with 2 nervous cops and the growing certainty that everything was about to get much worse before it got better. The officers hauled him to his feet and shoved him toward a cruiser. As they did, Dalton caught a glimpse of something at the facility's back fence. A flash of dark hair, a figure disappearing into trees. Confirmation that Sophia had made it out, that the evidence was safe, that this sacrifice might actually mean something. One of the cops saw him looking and followed his gaze, but by then there was nothing to see except shadows and morning light. "What are you smiling about?" the officer demanded. "Nothing," Dalton said, "just thinking about karma." They threw him in the back of the cruiser hard enough to rattle his teeth. As they pulled out of the parking lot, joining the convoy chasing a ghost on a motorcycle that wasn't his, Dalton leaned his head back against the seat and let himself hope. Not for rescue, not for escape, but for the simple possibility that truth might outlast the men trying to bury it. The holding cell was exactly what he'd expected. Concrete walls painted institutional gray, a metal bench bolted to the floor, a toilet in the corner that smelled of chemicals and desperation, and a fluorescent light that hummed with the persistence of institutional indifference. They'd stripped him of his cut, his boots, everything except jeans and a t-shirt, leaving him feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with clothing. Hours passed. No food, no water, no information about what was happening outside. Just silence and the hum of electricity and the occasional footstep of a guard checking to make sure he hadn't somehow escaped through solid walls. Dalton used the time to think, to plan, to map out every possible outcome of the situation Sophia had dragged him into. Most of those outcomes ended badly, with him dead or imprisoned for life or disappeared in a way that left no questions and fewer answers. But a few, a precious few, ended with justice served and truth spoken and the kind of victory that tasted like blood and freedom mixed together. He was mapping those possibilities when the door opened and Thomas Garrett walked in, alone, without backup or witnesses, carrying the expression of a man who'd stopped pretending to play by rules that had never really applied to him. "She got away," Garrett said, closing the door behind him. "My daughter. Slipped past 6 police cruisers, disappeared into the county like smoke. Left no trail except a burning motorcycle we found abandoned 10 miles from the state line. Stolen vehicle from a parking lot in town. She planned this, planned all of it. Smart girl. Too smart. Too much like her mother." Garrett sat on the bench across from Dalton, close enough to be threatening, far enough to maintain the illusion of control. "You knew she'd escape. That storage unit was a diversion, buying time while she got clear. You sacrificed yourself for her. She was worth it." Was she? Because right now you're in here and she's out there, and I guarantee you she's not thinking about you. She's thinking about survival, about disappearing, about starting over somewhere I'll never find her. You're a tool she used, nothing more. And tools get discarded when they're no longer useful. Dalton leaned forward, meeting Garrett's eyes with steady calm. "You're trying to convince me I made a mistake, that I should have sold her out, taken your deal, died easy instead of hard. But here's what you don't understand about people like me. We don't make decisions based on what's easy. We make them based on what's right." "Right?" Garrett laughed, the sound harsh in the small space. "Let me tell you about right. I spent 2 tours in Afghanistan doing the right thing, following orders, protecting civilians, trying to win hearts and minds in a country that wanted us dead. I watched friends get blown apart by IEDs, watched children turn into suicide bombers, watched corruption eat everything we tried to build. And when I came home, I was expected to what? Go back to pretending law and order meant something? That playing by the rules would actually change anything? So you became what you fought against. I became effective. I saw an opportunity to control the chaos instead of being controlled by it. My county, my rules, my profit. I protect the people who matter, punish the people who don't, and make money from the ones too stupid to know the difference. That's not corruption, that's evolution. And your daughter? She matter? Garrett's expression hardened. She mattered when she was mine, when she understood family loyalty meant supporting me, not sabotaging me. The moment she turned on me, the moment she chose some misguided sense of justice over blood, she stopped being my daughter and became a problem to solve. You shot her. I sent her a message that actions have consequences, that family means something, that betrayal carries a price. Garrett stood, pacing the small cell, but she didn't listen. Just like her mother didn't listen when I told her to stop asking questions about my work, to stop pushing for answers I couldn't give. Some people can't help themselves. They see darkness and think they have to bring light, never understanding that darkness serves a purpose. What happened to her mother? Garrett's pacing stopped. She left. That's the official story. Walked out one day and never came back. Couldn't handle being a military wife and then a cop's wife. Too much pressure. Sophia believes it because I sold it well, because she was only 12 and wanted to believe her mother would come back someday. But she's not coming back. No, she's in the national forest, 20 feet down in a grave I dug on a winter night when the ground was frozen and the world was quiet. She learned too much, asked too many questions, threatened to expose what I'd built, so I did what was necessary. What I'm going to do to you, and eventually to my daughter, because some problems can't be solved with threats or fear or institutional power. Some problems require permanent solutions. Dalton felt the cold certainty of those words settle into his bones. This wasn't a man who'd gotten lost on a bad road. This was a man who'd found a road he liked and paved it with bodies, who'd turned protection into predation, who'd killed his own wife and would kill his own daughter without hesitation or remorse. You're confessing to me because you think I'm not leaving this cell alive. I'm confessing because you're the only person who'll ever hear the truth, and dead men make excellent witnesses at trials that never happen. Garrett moved to the door, knocked twice. I'm going to disappear you. Not kill you in a way that raises questions, but transfer you to a federal facility for your protection. Except you'll never arrive. You'll vanish somewhere on the highway, another victim of violence, or whatever story serves the moment. And without a body, without evidence, without anyone asking the right questions, you'll just be another statistic, another criminal who got what he deserved. The door opened. 2 officers Dalton didn't recognize stood outside, wearing tactical gear without department insignias, holding weapons without serial numbers. Private contractors, Dalton realized. The kind of men who did dirty work for money and never left witnesses to complicate the narrative. "Take him to the transport van," Garrett ordered. "Make sure he's secure. I'll meet you at the transport point." They hauled Dalton to his feet, hands still cuffed, and marched him through the police station. It was late now, well past midnight, the building nearly empty except for a skeleton crew working dispatch and paperwork. No one looked at him as they passed. No one asked questions. Just another prisoner being moved. Nothing unusual, nothing worth noting. Outside, the parking lot was dark, except for security lights that created islands of illumination in an ocean of shadow. A white van sat waiting, unmarked and anonymous, its back doors open like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. They were 3 steps from the van when the shots rang out. The first contractor dropped instantly, a hole appearing in his forehead before his brain could process what was happening. The second managed to turn, to raise his weapon, before a second shot took him in the throat, sending him gurgling to the pavement. Dalton hit the ground on instinct, rolling behind a cruiser as more shots echoed through the parking lot. He heard shouting, heard Garrett screaming orders, heard the distinctive crack of a hunting rifle firing from distance with the kind of practice that came from years of practice. Then, silence. Just wind and the electric hum of security lights and the gurgle of a dying man slowly drowning in his own blood. "Dalton!" Sophia's voice, calling from the darkness beyond the parking lot lights. "Move, now!" He was up and running before conscious thought engaged, sprinting toward the sound of her voice with his hands still cuffed behind his back. More shots rang out behind him, but they were panicked now, wild, fired by cops who couldn't see their target and were trying to suppress ghost shooters in the dark. He hit the tree line and kept going, branches whipping his face, roots trying to trip him, until a hand grabbed his arm and yanked him sideways into a depression behind a fallen log. Sophia crouched beside him, dressed in black, face painted with camo, holding a rifle that looked military-grade and well-maintained. "Stay down," she whispered. Behind them, the parking lot erupted in organized chaos as more officers poured out of the station, flashlights sweeping the trees, voices coordinating search patterns. But they were searching blind, looking for an enemy they couldn't see, in terrain that swallowed light and sound equally. "The cuffs," Dalton hissed. Sophia pulled a key from her pocket, not standard issue, but close enough to work. She unlocked the cuffs with practiced efficiency, tossed them aside. "Can you ride?" "Can I—" "Your bike. I retrieved it from the impound lot 2 hours ago. It's parked half a mile north, along with supplies, new identification, and enough cash to get you to Mexico if that's where you want to go." Dalton stared at her. "You came back? After escaping? After getting clear? You came back? Did you think I'd just leave you to die? After you bought me time, after you took the fall." She checked her rifle, loading a fresh magazine. "My father taught me a lot of things. How to shoot, how to survive, how to kill when necessary. But my grandfather taught me something more important, that honor isn't optional and debts get paid." "Your grandfather, the homeless vet? Who you saved when you should have kept riding." "Who told me that the measure of a man is what he does when no one's watching, when there's no reward, when the right thing is also the hardest thing?" She smiled in the darkness. "I'm just paying forward what you started. Now, move, before they organize properly and we lose our window." They moved through the forest with Sophia leading, navigating by memory and moonlight, avoiding trails and clearings where flashlights could catch them. Behind them, the search continued, dogs barking, voices calling, the machinery of law enforcement grinding into action. But they stayed ahead of it, slipping through gaps in the perimeter, using terrain and darkness as allies. The bike waited exactly where she'd promised, his soft tail looking like salvation and escape welded together in chrome and leather. His cut lay across the seat, returned and intact, the lone wolf patch catching moonlight. "The evidence," Dalton said, pulling on his cut. "Did you get it to the journalist?" "Better. I uploaded everything to 6 different news outlets, 3 law enforcement agencies, and 2 federal prosecutors. By morning, the story will be everywhere, and my father's empire will be burning." She handed him a phone. "Jennifer Moss called 30 minutes ago. The Charlotte Observer is running the story in tomorrow's edition, front page. CNN picked it up. FBI's opening an investigation. It's over. He lost." Dalton took the phone, saw the messages, the confirmation that truth had escaped containment and was spreading like wildfire. He'll run. Garrett, he'll disappear before they can arrest him. Let him run. Let him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for justice to catch up. That's worse than any prison. She moved to leave, then paused. "There's something else. In the evidence, there was a file I didn't show you before, about your club, Iron Serpents. What about them?" My father's been planning a raid. Dalton SWAT assault on the clubhouse, complete with planted evidence of weapons trafficking and drug distribution. He was going to wipe out the local chapter, arrest everyone, seize all assets. Make it look like a righteous bust that would get him national recognition and a promotion to state-level law enforcement. Dalton felt ice in his veins. When? It was scheduled for 2 days from now, but with the scandal breaking, with federal oversight coming in, the raid's been canceled. Your brothers are safe. The club survives. She started to walk away into the darkness, mission complete, ready to disappear into whatever new life she'd prepared. But Dalton called after her. Where will you go? She turned back, barely visible in shadow. Somewhere hell never find me. Somewhere I can be someone other than Thomas Garrett's daughter. Maybe I'll learn to forgive myself for what I had to do, for the people I had to hurt to stop him. Or maybe I won't, but at least I'll be free. You saved a lot of lives tonight. Your father's victims, my brothers, everyone who would have suffered under his corruption. That has to count for something. It counts for survival, for the chance to try again, to be better, to find out who I am when I'm not running or fighting or watching my back. She raised a hand in farewell. Ride safe, Dalton Cross. And if you're ever in trouble, if you ever need someone to return the favor, leave word at the Charlotte Observer for Jennifer Moss. She'll know how to reach me. Then she was gone, melting into trees and night like she'd never existed at all, leaving only the memory of a police chief's daughter who'd killed to save lives, who'd framed an innocent man to stop a guilty one, who'd understood that sometimes justice required breaking every law it was supposed to uphold. Dalton stood alone beside his bike, listening to sirens in the distance, to the sound of an empire collapsing, to the first breaths of a freedom he'd earned by stopping when he should have kept riding. He threw his leg over the softail, felt the familiar weight, the promise of miles and distance, and the road unfolding forever ahead. He started the engine, the rumble cutting through the night like a declaration. Then he was riding, heading north, heading away from the chaos and toward whatever came next, carrying with him the memory of a woman who'd worn his cut like armor, who'd saved his life by giving him a reason to stop running from the battles that mattered. The highway stretched empty and eternal, stars overhead, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath them. Dalton opened the throttle and let the bike carry him forward, into dawn, into distance, into the next town, where maybe, just maybe, he'd stop when he should keep riding, because that's what decent men did, and because somewhere out there, a police chief's daughter had shown him that honor wasn't optional. Debts got paid, and the lone wolf patch didn't have to mean riding alone when it mattered. He crossed the county line as the sun broke over the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Behind him, Thomas Garrett's world was burning. Federal agents were mobilizing, and truth was spilling across headlines faster than lies could contain it. Ahead, the road continued, empty and inviting, full of the promise that came from knowing you'd done the right thing, even when the right thing almost got you killed. Dalton smiled beneath his helmet, feeling the wind, feeling alive, feeling like maybe, just maybe, the years of running had finally taught him when to stop, when to fight, when to sacrifice everything for someone who needed saving more than he needed safety. He thought about Bobby Chen, 23 years old, who died for nothing except being in the wrong place when bad men decided his life didn't matter. He thought about Sophia's mother, buried in a forest, forgotten except by a daughter who'd avenged her without ever knowing she needed avenging. He thought about all the lives saved by one woman's courage and one biker's decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. And he rode on, carrying those memories like fuel, like purpose, like the weight that turned a lone wolf into something more, a witness, a participant, a man who understood that brotherhood didn't require a charter or a chapter meeting or unanimous consent. Sometimes brotherhood meant standing beside a stranger because they needed standing beside and letting the consequences fall where they would. The phone in his pocket buzzed. He pulled over, checked the message. From Jennifer Moss, the journalist. Stories Live. FBI arrested Thomas Garrett 1 hour ago. Charges include murder, corruption, racketeering, and about 40 other felonies. You're cleared of all charges. Reed's real killer confessed. Turns out he was one of Garrett's contractors, tried to cut himself a deal. You're free to come home whenever you're ready. Dalton read the message twice, letting the weight of it settle. Free, cleared, vindicated. All the things he'd never expected to be, earned through sacrifice and trust and one night of standing beside someone who needed him more than he needed safety. He typed back, "Tell Sophia thank you for everything. And tell her if she ever needs anything, the Nomad owes her a debt that'll never be fully paid." The response came immediately. She says you're even, and that maybe lone wolves ride better when they remember they're still part of the pack, even when they're running solo. Dalton smiled, pocketed the phone, and looked at the road ahead. He thought about returning to Iron Serpent's territory, about checking in with brothers he hadn't ridden with in years, about maybe, possibly, considering the idea that Nomad didn't have to mean alone, just free to choose when to stop and when to ride. But that was a decision for later, for another mile, for the moment when the road told him it was time to turn around instead of pushing forward. For now, he had distance to cover, thoughts to organize, and a story to carry about the night a police chief's daughter wore his cut and showed him what honor looked like when it was stripped of everything except the choice between right and easy. He started the engine again, felt the Softail come alive beneath him, and merged back onto the highway. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the night's shadows, illuminating a world that looked the same as yesterday, but had fundamentally changed in ways both visible and hidden. Somewhere behind him, Thomas Garrett sat in a federal holding cell, his empire in ashes, his crimes exposed, his future measured in decades of imprisonment instead of years of profit. Somewhere ahead, Sophia was building a new life, free from her father's shadow, carrying scars, but no longer bound by the man who'd inflicted them. And somewhere on the road between past and future, Dalton rode forward, carrying the lone wolf catch with new understanding. That solitude was a choice, not a sentence, and that the best kind of freedom was the kind earned by stopping for strangers who needed saving, even when stopping might cost everything. He rode until the county was just a memory in his mirror, until the miles had stacked high enough to create distance from the chaos, until he felt the road beneath him like a promise kept and a future opening up with possibilities he'd forgotten existed. And when he finally stopped for gas and coffee and a moment to breathe, he looked at his reflection in the station window and saw something he hadn't seen in years, a man who'd stood his ground, who'd chosen right over easy, who'd stopped running long enough to remember why he'd started riding in the first place. The lone wolf, the nomad, the brother without brothers, who'd found family in the most unlikely place, in a storage unit with a police chief's daughter, in a frame that became freedom, in a sacrifice that became salvation for more people than anyone would ever know. Dalton raised his coffee to the reflection, to the ghost of Mason in Cole's face, to the memory of all the brothers who'd ridden before and would ride after, to the idea that sometimes the best way to honor the road was to get off it long enough to fight for someone who couldn't fight alone. Then he finished his coffee, threw his leg back over the bike, and rode on into a day that held no promises except the ones he made himself, to stop when stopping mattered, to ride when riding was required, and to carry the weight of honor like fuel that would never run out, no matter how many miles lay ahead. The highway called. He answered. And the story of the nomad who stopped for a police chief's daughter, who fought corruption with courage, who learned that lone wolves could still be part of the pack when it mattered most, became another legend whispered in clubhouses and garages, another reminder that the road gave back what you put into it, and that sometimes the hardest ride was the one where you stopped running and stood your ground. Dalton rode on, into distance, into memory, into the endless horizon where past and future met in the present moment of wheels on asphalt, wind in face, and the knowledge that he'd done something that mattered, something that would outlast the miles, something that turned a lone wolf into a legend worth telling. The road stretched on. He followed it. And somewhere in the space between what was and what would be, Dalton Cross found peace in the knowledge that he'd stopped when he should have kept riding. And that decision had saved more than just his own soul. It had saved lives, destroyed evil, and reminded him that brotherhood wasn't about patches or chapters or unanimous votes. Sometimes, brotherhood meant standing beside a stranger wearing your cut and trusting that the weight of honor would see you both through to the other side of darkness, into dawn, into the rest of your lives, carrying the memory of one night when everything changed because someone chose to stop running and start fighting for what was right. That was enough. That was everything. That was the road.